In this session, we are going to study God in the book of Proverbs. Is God expressed in the book of Proverbs? Yes, especially in the book of Proverbs says that God is deeply involved in creation. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 8 verses 22-31. The Lord formed me from the beginning. Before he created anything else, I was upon it in ages past. At the very first, before the earth began, I was born before the oceans were created, before the springs bubbled forth their waters, before the mountains were formed, before the hills I was born, before he made the earth and fields, and the first handfuls of soil. I was there when he set the clouds above, when he established springs deep in the earth. I was there when he set the limits of the seas, so they would not spread beyond their boundaries. And when he marked off the earth foundations, I was the architect at his side. I was his constant delight, rejoicing with his presence. And how happy I was with what he created. I rejoiced with all the human family. This poem deeply reflects on wisdom's role of God at creation. We have already studied that human wisdom is a personification of God. Actually, God's attribute, God's characteristics. So this part of poem is making the point that God created the cosmos, the universe, by his age-old wisdom. The language about the creation of wisdom is a powerful metaphor affirming that God's wisdom preceded anything else, which means God's wisdom was before anything. Actually, here, the wisdom was described as architect. In Hebrew word, Amon is the architect. Actually, the book of the New Living Translation, NLT, translate this Amon as architect. Means wisdom is an architect or creator in creation. So actually, in other words, we can say that God created the universe or cosmos through wisdom. So Genesis 1, and its reflection in Proverbs 8, just now we read, chapter 8, verses 22-31, inform us that the world was not created chaotically. Everything was created in order through the wisdom of God. Indeed, it was a real joy of God in his wisdom. So, Jesus, Proverbs chapter 8 verses 30 and 31 says, I was his constant delight, rejoicing always in his presence, and how happy I was with what he created. I rejoiced with all human family. Right? He was enjoying, rejoicing, right, with humanity in his wisdom. Now, Jesus is the wisdom of God. Jesus is the wisdom of God. The author of Gospel of Luke had a special focus on the wisdom of Jesus as he was young. It says, Luke chapter 2, verse 40, with wisdom beyond his years. So the wisdom of Jesus was beyond his years. In chapter 2, verse 46, Jesus was sitting among the religious teachers discussing deep questions with them. People were watching with amazement at his understanding and his answers. Jesus was really, really wise and was full of wisdom to even discuss with the religious teachers, even though he was very young, around 12 years. As Jesus started his ministry, people considered him as the wisdom teacher. And actually, from the time of Old Testament, in the society of Israel, there are some religious groups like priest, high priest, Levites, and we have like prophets, and also there's a group of what's called wisdom teacher. So Jesus, they were teaching, wisdom teacher were teaching the people how to apply the wisdom of God in practicing the law in their life. So Jesus was, in the time of Jesus Christ, he was considered by people as a wisdom teacher. Usually wisdom teachers were using one of the teaching methods called parable. Parable in Hebrew is mashal. This mashal was one of the popular methods for wisdom teachers to use in their teaching. So Jesus was also using parable, mashal. So therefore we can say for sure that Jesus was a wisdom teacher. If you look at Luke chapter 11, verse 31 says, the Queen of Sheba will rise up against this generation on Judgment Day and condemn it, because she came from a distant land to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and now someone greater than Solomon is here, and you refuse to listen to it. Solomon was described as the man of wisdom, but Jesus was even wiser than Solomon, who is a representative of wise men or men of wisdom. So Jesus was depicted as a man of wisdom and a wisdom teacher, according to the Gospel of Luke. And then how about in the New Testament epistles or letters? Paul the apostle also described Jesus as the wisdom of God. Yes. First Corinthians chapter 1 verse 30, God made Christ to be wisdom itself. Once again, God made Christ to be wisdom itself. Yes. Jesus is wisdom. Yes. And another verse, Colossians chapter 2 verse 3, Paul proclaims that in Christ lie hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Yes. All wisdom and knowledge was hidden in Jesus Christ. So, with this background, we see that New Testament associate Jesus with wisdom, woman wisdom. Woman wisdom, Proverbs chapter 8, wisdom, woman wisdom, and chapter 9, woman wisdom. Okay, now Jesus and woman wisdom. In Matthew chapter 11, Jesus addresses opponents who argued that John the Baptist was ascetic in his lifestyle. Ascetic means that it's like he doesn't enjoy the earthly things, and he doesn't enjoy drinking, eating, like trying to keep like fasting prayer or like that. So Matthew chapter 11 verses 18 and 19 says, "For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, here's a glutton and drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved by her actions." In the last sentence, Jesus claims that his behavior represents the behavior of woman wisdom. Wow. Let's go to Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 to 17. Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 to 17. Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created, and is supreme over all creation. For through him God created everything on earth. He made the things we can see and the things we can't see, such as thrones, kingdoms, rulers, and authorities in the unseen world. Everything was created through him and for him. And he existed before anything else, and he holds all creation together. In this passage, Paul doesn't directly describe Jesus as wisdom, but he used this expression in supreme. He existed before anything else. In other words, he's supreme over all creation. Which means he is the firstborn of all creation. So in chapter 8, wisdom was firstborn. Jesus is firstborn in Colossians. In this sense, we can say that Jesus is wisdom. Wow. Wisdom is firstborn. Jesus is firstborn. So, wisdom is the agent of divine creation is in Proverbs. Christ is the agent in Colossians, in Proverbs 8, verses 15 and 16. Because of me, kings reign and rulers make just decrees. Rulers lead with my help, and nobles make righteous judgment. Yes. all authorities are created by God, created by Jesus Christ. So they are, in other words, they are created by Jesus, by God. So Jesus is wisdom itself. And the book of Revelation make it clearer. There's a message to Laodicea. It says, the book of Revelation, chapter 3, verse 14, this is the message from the one who is Amen and faithful and true witness, the ruler of God's new creation. So the last phrase, God's new creation, means this reflects the idea Proverbs chapter 8 verses 22 and 30. Yes, there wisdom was described as the architect of wisdom. Here Jesus is standing in the place of woman wisdom. So the ruler of God's new creation. Wow. God's new creation. Yes. So wisdom and creation and Jesus are deeply related into each other. So up to here we have looked over the wisdom of God, the wisdom related to Jesus Christ, and how does Paul and the Gospel, especially Luke, describe Jesus. They describe Jesus as the foundation of creation, or they describe Jesus as wisdom itself. So in this sense, if we study and if we interpret chapter 8 of Proverbs 8 and 9, so we have to interpret this in the light of Jesus Christ. Okay, it's up to here.